Jasmine woke up to the soft glow of morning sunlight slipping through her small apartment window. The sound of the alarm clock was familiar, almost comforting, and she rubbed her tired eyes before getting out of bed. Her apartment was modest, with peeling paint on the walls and a few hand-me-down furniture pieces that had seen better days. But Jasmine never complained. She had learned early in life that happiness didn't come from things. It came from small moments, from helping others, and from working hard to make a difference in her own little way. After a quick shower and a simple breakfast of toast and tea, Jasmine dressed in her worn but clean waitress uniform. The apron was slightly frayed at the edges, but she wore it proudly, because it reminded her of the work she loved. She glanced at the small mirror above the sink and gave herself a little nod. Today would be another busy day, and she was ready. Jasmine worked at a small local diner, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names. The smell of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee greeted her as she stepped through the door, and she took a deep breath, letting the familiar aroma energize her. Her coworkers smiled and waved, and she returned the gestures with her warm, genuine smile. That smile was her secret power, one that made regular customers feel at home and new visitors feel welcome. She started her shift taking orders and serving food, moving quickly but carefully. She knew that every person who came in deserved her full attention. No matter how busy the diner was, there was a family in the corner, laughing over pancakes, and she made sure their drinks were filled and their plates arrived on time. There was an elderly man who always ordered the same coffee and sandwich, and she made a little joke with him, earning a chuckle that brightened both of their mornings. Despite the long hours and the low pay, Jasmine never let exhaustion show. She had learned to hide her tiredness behind a cheerful face, because she knew that kindness was contagious. When she handed a plate to a customer with a smile, she wasn't just serving food, she was sharing a little warmth, and that was her way of making the world better, even if only for a few minutes at a time. Outside the diner, Jasmine's life was not easy. She shared her apartment with her younger brother, who was still in school, and she worked long hours to make sure they both had enough to eat, enough to live, and enough to dream. Sometimes the bills piled up, and the rent seemed impossible, but she never gave up. Her determination and hope were stronger than any obstacle. Jasmine had a habit of noticing small things that others ignored. She noticed the neighbor struggling with heavy grocery bags, the child who dropped his toy on the street, and the elderly lady who walked slowly with a cane. She always offered help when she could, not expecting anything in return. It was simply who she was, a person who believed that small acts of kindness could make a big difference. Her life might have seemed ordinary to others, just a waitress in a small town, but there was something extraordinary about her. Jasmine had a heart full of generosity, and it shone through in everything she did. Even when she was tired, she never turned away someone who needed help. Even when she was busy, she always found time to smile and encourage others. This humility, this simple goodness, made her stand out in a world that often overlooked such qualities. That morning, as she wiped down tables and arranged chairs, Jasmine thought about the little joys in her life. The way her brother laughed when she brought him home a small treat, the way a stranger's smile could brighten her day, the way a regular customer's "thank you" felt like a small treasure. She didn't need fancy cars, expensive clothes, or wealth. Her happiness came from giving, caring, and being a good person. As the diner started filling up with customers, Jasmine moved gracefully among them, balancing trays of food and drinks, listening patiently to their stories, and offering a comforting word here and there. She didn't notice that someone outside the window was watching her, someone who would soon see just how special her heart really was. But that was typical of Jasmine. She never acted with the hope of being noticed or rewarded. She simply did what was right, and that was enough for her. By the time the morning rush ended, Jasmine felt the familiar mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. She had worked hard, helped others, and made people smile, and that was a good day in her book. She stepped outside for a brief moment, took a deep breath of fresh air, and adjusted her apron, ready to face the rest of the day, ready to continue spreading kindness in her own quiet, humble way. Jasmine's life was simple, but her spirit was extraordinary. She was a reminder that even in ordinary places, ordinary people can do extraordinary things, and that the world needs more hearts like hers, full of empathy, generosity, and quiet courage. Jasmine had just stepped out of the diner for her short lunch break. The warm sun touched her face, and the gentle breeze carried the familiar smells of the small town streets. She loved these little moments when she could step away from the rush of work, even for a few minutes, and just breathe. As she walked along the sidewalk, her mind wandered to her brother at home, probably finishing his homework and waiting for her to bring some leftover soup from the diner. The thought made her smile. As she turned the corner near the busy main road, she noticed movement ahead. A frail elderly lady was attempting to cross the street, her hands shaking slightly as she held a small, heavy shopping bag. The cars zoomed past, and a few honked impatiently. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. She could see the woman struggling, and without thinking twice, she quickened her pace. "Excuse me, ma'am, let me help you," Jasmine said softly. Stepping beside the woman, the lady looked up, startled at first, then relief washed over her face. "Oh, thank you, dear," she said in a trembling voice. Her eyes sparkled with gratitude as Jasmine gently took the bag from her, careful not to hurt her. Jasmine's hands were strong from years of work, but her touch was gentle, like she was holding something precious. They started walking together, Jasmine staying close to shield the lady from the speeding cars. She could feel the woman's cautious steps and slowed her own pace to match. They moved slowly, but steadily. Jasmine kept a calm and cheerful tone, talking quietly to distract the lady from her worry. "The sun is so nice today, isn't it? It feels like spring has finally arrived," she said, and the lady chuckled, the sound light and musical. As they reached the middle of the road, a large delivery truck approached, and Jasmine instinctively stepped forward to make sure the lady was safe. She held her arm out protectively, and the truck swerved just enough to give them space. The lady gripped Jasmine's hand tightly, and Jasmine whispered, "Almost there, just a few more steps." It was a small moment, but in it, Jasmine's courage and care shone through. Finally, they reached the other side, and the lady's knees bent slightly as she caught her breath. Jasmine set the bag down carefully and gave her a warm smile. "There you go, safe and sound," she said. The lady's hands shook as she reached out to touch Jasmine's arm. "You are such a kind soul," she whispered. "Thank you, my dear, for helping me." Jasmine waved her off politely. "It's nothing, really, I'm happy to help," she said. But the gratitude in the lady's eyes made her heart swell with a quiet joy. What Jasmine didn't notice, however, was the figure standing across the street, leaning slightly against his sleek black car, observing everything with an intense gaze. Alexander, the elderly lady's son, a billionaire who rarely revealed himself to the public, had been in town on a private visit. He saw Jasmine's every movement, her gentle gestures, the way she didn't hesitate to put herself at risk for a stranger. Her kindness was so pure that it struck him like a revelation. Alexander felt a strange mix of admiration and disbelief. Could someone so ordinary in appearance hold such extraordinary goodness in her heart? He watched as Jasmine smiled at the lady, listened patiently to her small words of thanks, and helped her settle her groceries safely. There was no hesitation, no thought of reward, only a natural and instinctive kindness that was rare in the world. As Jasmine prepared to walk away, she bent down slightly to pick up a small coin the lady had dropped, handing it back with a polite nod. Alexander's curiosity grew. He wanted to know more about her, who she was, what made her so selfless. Every little action she took left a lasting impression on him. He knew he had witnessed something extraordinary, something that went beyond wealth, status, or appearances. Jasmine continued down the sidewalk, adjusting her apron, unaware that someone's eyes followed her every step. The encounter, simple and brief as it was, had already planted a seed of change, not just in the elderly lady, who smiled long after Jasmine left, but in Alexander too, who realized that true value in life was not measured by riches, but by the goodness one carried in the heart. Little did Jasmine know, this single act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. All she knew was that helping someone in need felt right, and that was enough. She walked with a light step, humming softly to herself, feeling the quiet satisfaction that came from making the world a little safer, a little warmer, with her simple act of compassion. From across the street, Alexander leaned casually against his sleek black car. Though his mind was far from casual, he had been in town on business, attending meetings and checking on investments, but what he had witnessed a few moments ago had completely captivated him. The young waitress, with her worn apron and tired hands, had performed a small act of kindness, yet it had struck him with a force he had not expected. He watched as Jasmine walked with a quiet confidence, her steps unhurried yet purposeful. She had helped the elderly lady without hesitation, without asking for recognition or reward. The sincerity in her gestures, the warmth in her smile, even the gentle way she had adjusted the lady's shopping bag, all of it left a lasting impression on him. Alexander had met many people in his life, wealthy, influential, even famous, but very few had the kind of genuine goodness he had just seen. The bustling street seemed to fade into the background as he observed her. Cars honked impatiently, people hurried past, but Alexander noticed only Jasmine. He studied her carefully, noting the way she held herself with quiet dignity, how she seemed to carry a light inside her that no amount of hardship could dim. There was a rare authenticity in her actions, something money could never buy. He felt a strange pull, an urge to learn more about this young woman. He wanted to see how she lived, what made her laugh, what made her worried. Could someone like her truly exist in a world so often driven by ambition, greed, and appearances? He realized he had been searching for something real, something meaningful, and perhaps, unknowingly, he had found it in Jasmine. Alexander stayed there longer than he intended, pretending to check his phone, glancing at the passing cars. While keeping his eyes on her, he watched as she stopped for a moment to tie her shoelace, adjusted her apron, and then continued down the sidewalk, each small movement radiating care and thoughtfulness. He felt a growing admiration, but also a sense of responsibility. A part of him wanted to intervene, to approach her, yet another part knew he had to be patient. He remembered the elderly lady, who had now entered a nearby shop, waving goodbye to Jasmine. Alexander's mind wandered to his mother, the woman who had raised him with love and wisdom, and he realized she had been right to say that true character could be found in the simplest of actions. He had seen it firsthand now, and it left him both humbled and inspired. As Jasmine walked further down the street, Alexander decided he would not reveal himself immediately. There was a need to observe, to understand her world, her struggles, and the genuine kindness she offered without expectation. He wanted to know if her heart was as extraordinary as it seemed, and he suspected it was. The city around them moved quickly, but in this moment, time seemed slower for Alexander. He felt a strange connection to someone he had never met, a connection built entirely on the integrity and selflessness he had witnessed. He thought about how often people overlooked small acts of compassion, and how remarkable it was that someone like Jasmine performed them effortlessly, almost instinctively. He realized that this encounter, brief as it had been, might change him as much as it could change her life. Alexander had always believed that wealth and status could solve problems, bring happiness, or command respect, but watching Jasmine, he understood that true influence came from kindness, humility, and the courage to do good without expecting anything in return. As Jasmine turned a corner and disappeared from view, Alexander straightened his posture, taking a deep breath. He knew he had to meet her again, to know the person behind the gentle smile and caring hands. There was a story there, a life filled with strength, generosity, and quiet resilience, and he felt compelled to be a part of it. He made a silent promise to himself. He would find a way to connect with her, not for business, not for fame, but because he had never met someone whose heart spoke so loudly without uttering a single word. With one last glance down the street, Alexander got into his car, his mind racing with plans, possibilities, and the hope that he could somehow show Jasmine that her small act of kindness had not gone unnoticed. For him, this was more than curiosity. It was admiration, inspiration, and perhaps the start of something neither of them could have anticipated. The next day, Jasmine returned to the diner, her steps light despite the early hour. She felt the usual mixture of tiredness and determination as she tied her apron and arranged the tables. The morning sun streamed through the windows, painting golden patterns on the worn floor, and for a moment, she paused to appreciate the little beauty in the ordinary. She hadn't thought much about the encounter with the elderly lady yesterday. It was just another day, another act of kindness, something she did without thought or expectation. Helping someone in need was simply part of who she was, but what she didn't know was that someone had noticed, someone who found every small gesture extraordinary. Across town, Alexander couldn't stop thinking about her. He had returned that evening to the same street, pretending to be casual, observing Jasmine from a distance. There was something mesmerizing about the way she moved, the effortless warmth in her interactions. He watched as she smiled at a delivery man, held the door open for a child, and greeted neighbors she passed. It was as if kindness followed her wherever she went. Finally, unable to resist, Alexander decided to approach her. but he did so cautiously, not wanting to startle her. He waited until she stepped out of the diner for a quick break, carrying a small notepad in her hand, jotting down orders. Her attention was focused entirely on her work, oblivious to the world beyond. "Excuse me," he called gently, his voice polite but calm. Jasmine looked up, slightly startled, and met his gaze. There was an unexpected depth in his eyes, something familiar yet strange. He smiled faintly, nodding toward the diner. "I couldn't help noticing. You're very kind," he said. The words were simple, but they carried weight, and Jasmine felt a small warmth in her chest. "Oh, thank you," she replied, her voice soft, unsure of why a stranger was complimenting her. She had never sought praise for her actions, and it felt slightly awkward to hear it, yet there was something genuine about him, something that made her want to trust him. Alexander continued, "I saw how you helped the elderly lady yesterday, and I wanted to say, it meant a lot." Jasmine blinked, recognition dawning slowly. She remembered the lady, the bag, the busy street, and a faint smile appeared. "Oh, that. It was nothing," she said, trying to sound casual, though a blush crept onto her cheeks. He chuckled softly, a sound that was both warm and sincere. "Nothing to you, maybe, but it's rare to see someone act so selflessly these days. Most people would have just walked past, but you didn't hesitate. That's remarkable." There was a pause, and Jasmine found herself studying him, wondering why he had taken the time to say this. Most people were too busy to notice, let alone acknowledge. They began walking together along the quiet sidewalk, small talk flowing naturally between them. Alexander asked simple questions about the diner, about the town, about Jasmine's day, and she answered with honesty and a gentle humor. There was no pretense, no hidden agenda, just two people sharing a conversation. Yet every word, every gesture, left a strong impression on Alexander. He noticed how she spoke to the delivery boy passing by, offering a kind word and a smile, how she paused to help a street vendor organize his small cart, how she never once seemed impatient or annoyed. Every little detail fascinated him. Each act, though ordinary to her, revealed a depth of character that money could never measure. For Jasmine, the conversation felt easy, natural. She didn't know why this stranger intrigued her, why his presence was oddly comforting. She felt no pressure, no expectation, just a sense that he genuinely saw her for who she was. Alexander's calm demeanor, his attentive nature, and the way he seemed to notice everything made her feel understood. By the time they reached the corner where their paths would part, Alexander felt a mix of admiration and anticipation. He wanted to know more, to see more of the person behind the kind acts, and yet he respected the space between them. Jasmine waved goodbye, smiling politely, unaware of the profound effect she had on him. As she walked back to the diner, humming softly to herself, Alexander lingered for a moment, taking in the scene. He realized that this brief interaction, this simple conversation, had deepened his fascination with her. It was not just her kindness he admired, it was her authenticity, her warmth, the natural grace with which she moved through the world. He made a quiet decision, one that would change both their lives. He would find a way to meet her again, not as a stranger, not as an observer, but as someone who truly appreciated the extraordinary goodness she carried. Something about Jasmine had awakened a part of him that he had long forgotten, the part that believed in genuine, selfless human connection. And as Jasmine returned to her work, serving her customers with her familiar smile, Alexander watched from a distance one last time, feeling inspired, hopeful, and eager. The small talk had been simple, but the impression she left was monumental, and he knew that this was only the beginning.
The diner buzzed with its usual morning energy, the clatter of dishes and the low hum of conversation blending into a familiar symphony that Jasmine had grown to love. She moved between tables with practiced ease, her apron slightly creased from hours of work, but her smile never faltered. Each plate she carried, each cup she poured, was accompanied by a warmth that made even the busiest customers feel welcome. Jasmine had always felt at home here. Despite the long hours and the modest pay, the diner was more than just a workplace. It was a community, a place where people shared stories, laughed together, and sometimes, just sometimes, let their guard down and revealed a small piece of their hearts. She loved listening, offering advice when asked, or simply giving a kind smile when someone needed it most. A table near the window held the regulars, a retired couple who came every morning for pancakes and strong coffee. They greeted her with familiar smiles, and she responded with the same, filling their cups, asking about their day, making small jokes that always earned a chuckle or two. It was a simple exchange, but it carried the weight of genuine connection. In the corner sat Mr. Jenkins, a quiet man who always ordered the same sandwich and coffee. He rarely spoke, but Jasmine made it a point to check on him, to ask if he needed anything, and sometimes, if he seemed lonely, she would chat a little. Her presence softened the edges of his solitary routine, and she never once minded the extra effort it took to engage him. Amid the breakfast rush, Jasmine's mind occasionally wandered to the previous day's encounter with the elderly lady. She had thought little of it then, assuming it was just another act of kindness, but a small part of her wondered if she had truly made a difference. The thought made her heart swell quietly, not with pride, but with the simple satisfaction that comes from helping another human being. The lunch crowd began to arrive, and the diner became a whirlwind of activity. Orders flew in, drinks were refilled, trays carried carefully between tables, and Jasmine moved seamlessly, like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of meals and smiles. Her co-workers leaned on her experience, knowing she could handle the chaos with patience and grace. Even the new hires watched her with quiet admiration, learning not just how to serve food, but how to serve people. During a brief pause between tables, Jasmine stepped outside to take a deep breath, wiping her hands on her apron. The sunlight warmed her face, and for a moment, the noise of the diner faded. She watched the street, scanning the crowd unconsciously. Though she didn't know why, her heart had a small, persistent hope, a feeling that something, or someone, might appear, though she didn't dare name it. Inside, a young family sat eating breakfast, the children laughing loudly as they shared syrupy pancakes. Jasmine knelt down to help tie a little boy's shoelace that had come undone. His mother smiled gratefully, and Jasmine waved it off, saying, "It's nothing, really, I'm happy to help." The small act went unnoticed by many, but it was moments like this that defined her day, giving her a quiet sense of purpose and fulfillment. By mid-afternoon, the diner had quieted slightly, giving Jasmine a chance to wipe tables and straighten chairs. She hummed softly to herself, a habit she had when she was content, moving gracefully despite the ache in her feet and shoulders. Life was far from easy, but these moments of calm and satisfaction reminded her why she endured, why she worked tirelessly, and why she cared so deeply for others. Unbeknownst to her, someone was watching again, not from across the street this time, but from a distance inside the diner itself. Alexander had returned, drawn not just by curiosity but by fascination. He observed her interactions with the customers, the way she remembered names, the way she treated each person with the same level of respect and warmth. His admiration deepened, and he realized that he wanted to know more, not just about her kindness, but about her life, her struggles, her dreams. As the day wore on, Jasmine continued her work without complaint, unaware of the quiet observer in the corner. Alexander's presence was unnoticed, but it carried weight. Each small gesture, each gentle smile, left a mark on him, reinforcing the impression that Jasmine was extraordinary, not because of fame or wealth, but because of the unwavering goodness in her heart. By the time the dinner rush began, Alexander finally decided he would introduce himself properly, but he knew he had to do it carefully. He needed to approach her not as a stranger, not as a man of influence, but as someone who appreciated her true self. Meanwhile, Jasmine continued her rhythm, serving, caring, and connecting, the heartbeat of the diner, unaware that her life was quietly on the verge of change.
It was late afternoon when Jasmine stepped out of the diner for a quick break. The sunlight was softer now, casting long shadows across the street. The air carried a gentle warmth, and the faint hum of the town gave her a small sense of peace. She held her notepad loosely in one hand, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear as she walked, her thoughts drifting to the day's work and her younger brother waiting at home. She barely noticed the figure leaning casually against a lamppost nearby, his posture relaxed but his eyes fixed on her. Alexander had returned, not as a businessman or an observer from afar, but disguised in casual clothes, blending in with the townspeople. He wanted to see her again, to witness more of the genuine kindness that had captivated him the day before. As Jasmine moved down the sidewalk, a small commotion caught her attention. A stray dog had wandered into the road, barking nervously as cars passed by. Jasmine's heart raced instinctively, and she rushed forward, holding her hands out gently. "It's okay, boy, come here," she coaxed softly. The dog hesitated, then cautiously approached her, tail wagging timidly, she knelt down and stroked its head, her calm presence making the frightened animal feel safe. Alexander watched, silently amazed. The way she handled the situation was effortless, natural, and full of compassion. She didn't hesitate to step into a busy street, to calm a scared creature, and to protect it without thinking of herself. Each small act, though ordinary to Jasmine, seemed extraordinary to him, and he felt a stronger pull toward her than ever before. The dog eventually trotted along beside her as she continued walking, and she glanced down at it with a gentle smile. "You need to get home too, don't you?" she murmured. The little dog seemed to understand, following her obediently, and Jasmine guided it to a nearby yard, ensuring it was safe. She stood up, brushing off her hands, and that was when she noticed a young man standing across the street, casually leaning against the lamppost, watching her. "Hi," he called softly, and Jasmine froze for a moment, unsure who he was. There was something familiar in his voice, though she couldn't place it. "Hello," she replied cautiously, her curiosity mixed with caution. He stepped closer, raising his hand slightly in a gesture of calm. "I just wanted to say, I saw you yesterday, helping the elderly lady," he said, "and I wanted to see if I could meet you properly." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat, her mind raced, remembering the elderly lady and the busy street. She had not expected anyone to notice her, let alone approach her so directly. "Oh, you saw that?" she asked quietly, unsure what to say. The man nodded, a sincere expression on his face. "Yes, and I wanted to know more about the person who would do something so selfless." They began walking together, the rhythm slow and easy. Alexander kept the conversation light at first, asking about her work, the diner, and her daily routine. Jasmine answered openly, her voice warm and steady, yet there was an unmistakable spark of curiosity in her eyes. She wanted to know who this man was, why he had taken an interest in her, and why his presence felt both unexpected and oddly comforting. As they turned a corner, Alexander asked gently, "Do you often help strangers like that?" Jasmine chuckled softly, "I guess I do. If I can, I always try. It's just the right thing to do," she said. Her honesty was refreshing, and Alexander felt a deep respect growing for her. There was no arrogance, no expectation, just a natural goodness that shone through every word. For Jasmine, the encounter felt surreal, yet comforting. There was something in his eyes that made her feel safe, as if he understood without needing to know everything. She realized that her instincts about people were usually correct, and she trusted this stranger, even as her curiosity about him grew. By the time they reached a quiet bench in the park nearby, the sun was dipping toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. They sat down, talking about small, ordinary things, favorite foods, childhood memories, the little joys that made life meaningful. Yet beneath the simplicity of the conversation, a connection was forming, a subtle understanding that neither of them could ignore. Alexander finally smiled, leaning back slightly. "I'm glad I met you, Jasmine," he said, and she looked at him in surprise. "Me too," she replied softly. "You're different," he added, "and that's a good thing." In that quiet moment, surrounded by the soft glow of evening, both of them realized something important. Sometimes, the most unexpected encounters could change everything, and kindness, sincerity, and courage could create a bond stronger than wealth, status, or appearances. This was just the beginning, and neither of them knew how deeply it would affect their lives. The park was quiet now, the sun dipping low behind the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the trees and benches. Jasmine and Alexander sat side by side, their conversation flowing naturally, yet there was a tension beneath the surface, an unspoken curiosity about each other that neither wanted to rush. Alexander had been careful, observing her, talking lightly, gauging her personality, and now he felt the moment was right to reveal the truth. "I have something to tell you," Alexander said quietly, his voice calm but deliberate. Jasmine tilted her head, intrigued but cautious. "Yes?" she asked, sensing the seriousness in his tone. He took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "Yesterday, when you helped my mother across the street, I was watching," he said. "I'm her son." For a moment, Jasmine froze, the words sinking slowly into her mind. Her eyes widened, and she blinked. "Your mother?" she asked, the surprise evident in her voice. Alexander nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Yes, she told me about her day, but I wanted to see for myself. I wanted to see the person who showed her such kindness." Jasmine felt a swirl of emotions, shock, disbelief, and a strange mix of embarrassment and pride. She had never expected anyone, let alone the son of a billionaire, to be watching her. I didn't know, she stammered softly, looking down at her hands, fiddling with the edge of her apron. I was just helping, she added, her voice almost a whisper. Alexander reached out gently, placing a hand near hers without touching it, careful not to overwhelm her. I know, he said sincerely, and that's what makes it so remarkable. The way you helped her, without expecting anything in return, showed a kind of goodness that I rarely see. That's why I wanted to meet you, to understand the person behind that heart of yours. Jasmine looked up at him, her eyes meeting his, and in that gaze, she saw something she hadn't expected: admiration, respect, and something deeper, a genuine appreciation for who she was, not for what she did, but for the very essence of her character. She felt a warmth spreading in her chest, a mixture of relief and quiet joy, knowing that her small act of kindness had not gone unnoticed. Alexander continued, I know this may seem strange, and perhaps even unbelievable, but I want you to know that your actions left a mark on me, on my mother, and on the way I view the world. Your courage, your patience, your generosity, it's rare, Jasmine, and I think the world needs more people like you. Jasmine felt her lips curl into a small, shy smile. She had never considered herself remarkable, she had only ever acted according to what she felt was right, yet hearing his words, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, made her realize that even the simplest acts of kindness could resonate in ways she had never imagined. They sat in silence for a few moments, the park around them fading into a calm background. The distant sound of children playing, the rustle of leaves, and the soft evening breeze made the moment feel almost magical. Alexander's presence was steady, reassuring, and Jasmine felt a sense of trust she rarely experienced with strangers. Finally, she spoke softly, I didn't do it to be noticed, I like helping people when I can. Alexander nodded, and that's why it's so powerful. It's real, it's genuine, and it can't be bought or forced. Jasmine, what you did, it reminded me that even in a world full of chaos and greed, there are still hearts like yours. Her heart swelled with a quiet pride, not the kind that seeks attention, but the kind that comes from knowing that she had made a difference in someone's life, even unknowingly. Alexander smiled again, this time more openly. I hope you know that this isn't just a fleeting moment, Jasmine. I want to know more about you, to see the world through your eyes, to learn from your kindness. Jasmine felt a flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. She had never met anyone who saw her so completely, and the thought that someone of Alexander's world could value her for who she truly was left her both humbled and inspired. She nodded slowly, a soft smile on her face. I'd like that, she said quietly. In that moment, the revelation had shifted everything. What began as a simple act of helping an elderly lady had become the start of something far greater. Alexander had seen her heart, and she had seen his respect. A connection was forming, one built not on wealth or status, but on authenticity, kindness, and the quiet courage to do what is right. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, bathing the park in the last soft light of day, Jasmine and Alexander sat together, both aware that this encounter would change their lives forever. Neither of them knew exactly where it would lead, but one thing was certain: sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can spark the most extraordinary stories. The following days felt different for Jasmine, though outwardly, everything seemed the same. She continued her work at the diner, carrying trays of food, pouring coffee, and smiling at every customer, yet something inside her had shifted, a quiet awareness that life could change in the most unexpected ways. That small act of helping an elderly lady across the road had set off a chain of events she never could have imagined. Alexander had begun visiting the diner regularly, though he never made his wealth or status obvious. He simply enjoyed being near her, watching her kindness in action, and learning about the little world she created around herself. It wasn't about impressing her or proving anything, but about seeing the person she truly was, day after day, and understanding why her heart was so extraordinary. Jasmine noticed him, of course, but she didn't judge or assume. There was something in the way he observed her quietly, respectfully, that felt safe and comforting. She began to feel a growing sense of trust, a belief that not everyone in the world was looking for something in return. That connection, subtle yet profound, gave her courage and a renewed sense of purpose. Word of Jasmine's kindness had quietly spread through the small town, thanks to the elderly lady. who had shared her story with friends and neighbors, people started noticing, not just her work in the diner, but her generosity and patience with everyone she met. Small acts, a smile to a lonely customer, a hand to someone struggling, a comforting word to a stranger, had created ripples far beyond what she could see. One afternoon, a small envelope arrived at the diner, addressed to Jasmine. Inside was a handwritten note from Alexander, expressing his admiration for her heart, his gratitude for showing him the power of genuine kindness, and an offer to support her dreams in any way she wished, not wealth for the sake of wealth, not grand gestures, but opportunities that could help her continue making a difference. Jasmine was overwhelmed, not by the generosity itself, but by the recognition of her character. She had never acted for reward, and yet now she realized that true goodness never goes unnoticed. The note reminded her that even ordinary people could touch extraordinary lives, and that courage and kindness had their own quiet, undeniable power. Over the weeks, Jasmine began taking small steps toward her dreams, supported not just by Alexander, but by the town she had helped inspire. A community that once barely noticed her now celebrated her. But more importantly, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her actions had created a positive impact. She continued to work at the diner, but now with a sense of purpose that was larger than herself. Alexander remained a quiet presence, never imposing, always respectful, and Jasmine gradually grew comfortable with him, learning about his life, his values, and the way he, too, appreciated genuine human connection over wealth or status. Together, they discovered that respect and admiration could grow into trust and friendship, and perhaps, in time, something even deeper. The story of the humble waitress who helped an elderly lady across the road became more than just a moment. It became an inspiration, a reminder that the simplest acts could carry the greatest meaning. Jasmine's courage, patience, and unwavering kindness had not only touched Alexander and his mother but had begun to ripple outward, inspiring others to notice, appreciate, and emulate small acts of selflessness. One quiet evening, as Jasmine closed the diner and stepped outside into the soft glow of streetlights, she looked up at the sky, feeling a warmth in her heart. She realized that life had changed, not because of sudden wealth or fame, but because her goodness had been recognized, because her small, selfless actions had created a lasting impression. Alexander stood nearby, smiling gently, and she felt a sense of connection that went beyond words, beyond expectation. And in that moment, Jasmine understood a simple, profound truth, that life rewards kindness, not always in ways one expects, but in ways that touch hearts, build relationships, and inspire change. Her journey, which had begun with a single act of helping someone in need, had blossomed into a story of transformation, hope, and the enduring power of human goodness. The humble waitress had shown the world, and herself, that one heart, one action, could make a difference, and sometimes, the smallest gestures carry the greatest weight, leaving a legacy that money could never buy and a light that could never be dimmed.